I'm not sure when exactly I first heard the word underrated in regards to sports, but I believe I first heard the term underrated in connection with former Seattle Seahawks running back Chris Warren. Back then, my friends and I would always talk about Chris Warren a lot, but in the sports world, underrated always seemed to be associated with Seattle Seahawks running back Chris Warren. In this video, I'm going to take a brief look at Chris Warren's career and talk about if Chris Warren was the most underrated running back ever. In 1990, Chris Warren, he was drafted in the 4th round by the Seattle Seahawks out of Division III Ferrum College. Now, to begin his NFL career, the 6'2", 228-pound running back would be used to return kicks and punts and did a good job for the Seahawks special teams unit. During Warren's first 2 seasons, he only totaled 17 rush attempts as John L. Williams and Derek Fenner would get the majority of the carries for Seattle. Then in 1992, former Raiders head coach Tom Flores would be the new Seahawks coach, in Warren. He'd become the starting running back and lead the team in carries in 1992. In addition to that, Chris Warren, he'd still be returning kicks and punts. And also Warren, he got over 1,000 yards while averaging a very respectable 4.6 yards per carry. All this while Seattle struggled with the quarterback position. This was in 1992, as Chris Warren, he finished 4th in the NFL in 1992 in all-purpose yards. Then in 1993, Warren, he made his first Pro Bowl, getting 1,072 yards in only 14 games. As number 42, he was inactive during the last 2 games of the NFL season in 1993. During this season, rookie Rick Mirer, he'd be the quarterback for the Seahawks. As the Seahawks, they didn't allow Mirer to do too much in terms of going through his progressions, as Rick Mirer, he would not wind up being the answer quarterback for Seattle. Now into the 1994 season, and up to this point, I think there was a clear top tier of running backs in the early 90s with Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders, and Thurman Thomas, as these 3 would consistently produce greatly during this period. But Thomas, he'd begin to decline and would not keep pace with Smith and Sanders going forward. But as for Warren, his 94-95 seasons could arguably put him in that top tier. But instead, I don't remember hearing too much about Chris Warren being one of the top running backs amongst the national media, but maybe I'm wrong, but I believe I started to hear the term underrated. So 1994, Warren, he rushed for over 1,500 yards, and at 6'2", 228 pounds, he was tough to tackle, had good feet and speed to get to the outside, and it seemed that whenever Warren was going to get tackled down, he would power through for a couple extra yards. Then in 1995, Chris Warren, he rushed for over 1,300 yards and finished 2nd in the NFL behind Emmitt Smith with 15 touchdowns. In 1994-1995, Warren produced, getting over 300 carries in each of those seasons and became a 2nd-team All-Pro player in each of those seasons. But then for some reason, Warren wouldn't be the same player going forward. For the 96 and 97 NFL seasons, Warren's carries and production went down, although Warren, he did average 4.2 yards a carry in each of those seasons. I found an article from the Roanoke Times from late September in 1996, and in that article mentioned how much Warren struggled in Seattle's first 3 games, as head coach Dennis Erickson stated that Warren, he hasn't had a lot of space to run. Furthermore, that article also mentioned that Warren had become a marked man and defenses are stacking their defensive fronts to stop him. Moreover, the article went on to say that there's whispers that Warren had stopped running hard, which Chris Warren denied and claimed he's never quit on anything. Meanwhile, backup running back Lamar Smith, he had a great game in Seattle's 3rd game against Kansas City, while Chris Warren struggled during that game. Subsequently, for the 96 and 97 seasons, Chris Warren would not get the heavy workload in the backfield like he did for the previous 2 seasons, as Lamar Smith would get his share of carries going forward. So for the 1998 NFL season, the Seattle Seahawks, they signed running back Ricky Watters. As a result, Seattle, they tried to trade Chris Warren, but were unsuccessful, and thus they released their all-time leading rusher at the time. Furthermore, Warren, he was also released because there was no room for his $4.1 million annual salary. This led to Chris Warren signing with Dallas to back up Emmitt Smith, and to also cut down on Smith's carries and to give Smith more of a break. Now, Chris Warren, he only played about 3 seasons in Dallas, averaged over 4 yards a carry, but didn't end too well, as during a game versus Tampa Bay, Warren dropped a couple passes, exchanged words with coaches, and the Cowboys couldn't tolerate his lackadaisical effort no more. Chris Warren would go on to play one more game in 2000 with the Philadelphia Eagles, and then that would be the end of Chris Warren's NFL career. So was Chris Warren the most underrated running back ever? Underrated is a popular topic in many places, including for this channel, as it seems to be a topic that people like. There's no proper way to actually rate players, as a lot of it has to do how we perceive things. When I have underrated players videos, I have such a variety of opinions in the comment section and who they think is underrated, as we all have our solid reasons. Now for me, I think the most underrated running back ever is Charlie Gardner, as I'm sure there's several who disagree, but I would agree that Chris Warren, he was very underrated. One reason why someone may be underrated is where that player plays and how successful that team is. In Chicago, we never got Seattle Seahawks games on TV, but I was able to see several Raiders, Chiefs, and Broncos games. Unfortunately, Chris Warren, he played on some bad Seattle Seahawks teams on the West Coast. His highlights were the only way to see number 42 back in the day. But for those highlights, Warren, he had some tremendous runs, and luckily for YouTube, I can go back and watch old Seattle games to watch more of number 42. Statistically, Chris Warren had 2 tremendous seasons in 1994 and 1995, and instead of being mentioned as a top-tier running back, it seemed Chris Warren was mentioned as underrated, as I really want to say that this was the first time that I heard the term underrated, which is why Chris Warren and the term underrated has always stuck with me.
Chris Warren on the toss, nowhere to go, he cuts it back. Chris Warren! Touchdown! How often do you see a coach smiling with 4 minutes to go in the third quarter of a game? And there's a look of disbelief by Jerry Ball. You do not make up being raked over the coals by a team 10 out of 11 years with one night, but this is close. The patience that he had going back and then turns on the speed. I mean, between he and Galloway, once they see a small opening, they're gone. 16 carries, 107 yards, 3 touchdowns for Chris Warren.
Real quick, I just want to thank all those who have supported 90 Sports Nostalgia. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, share, and check out the links below for Patreon and merch. Thank you so much. Chris Warren, the most underrated running back ever?